First, let me introduce the panelists. First is Frank McArthur, who's the Vice President of Sales at Alvaria. Next is Caitlin Long, who is the Senior Director of Product Management and Strategy at Bandwidth. And then Ramy Riad, who is the Director of Innovation and Messaging Strategy. So the idea for this panel literally started 2 years ago. When I had the opportunity to be working with another company, consulting to them in terms of how to be able to maximize their messaging efficiency, utilizing a different CPaaS provider. And the individual that I worked with is Frank McArthur, and the company that I was with at the time was called LiveVox, which has since been acquired by NICE. And again, that was about 2 years ago. One of the things that impressed me most about it was there were a few people in the organization who understood messaging, but as a CCaaS provider, a customer care or a call center as a service provider, which is what LiveVox was, they really didn't have a strong grasp of messaging per se, when in reality they had customers who were creating violations on various types of compliance issues, and it rippled through the ecosystem, just the internal ecosystem of them working with their CPaaS provider, which is why we ended up thinking about this. And the driving aspect of it is the size of the CCaaS environment and the opportunity for the CPaaS providers to be able to tap into that. Now, as time goes by, hopefully we all educate ourselves, and I tried to educate myself in terms of CCaaS, CPaaS alignment. And then I had the opportunity to meet Caitlin in conversation in putting this panel together. And we started to realize, let's just shift from CCaaS to overall customer experience. So that's kind of the genesis behind all this. And that's why we call this the power duo in digital engagement. So if you or enterprise customers have ever tried to fix customer experience by bolting on another widget, patch, or channel, this essentially is the session for you given the participants. And it's really not about messaging volume or omnichannel bragging rights. It's about meeting consumers where they are, when they are, with speed, relevance, and most of all, trust. And that takes an ecosystem that plays well together, essentially combining the various resources and perspectives. So that's a continuing theme throughout the day in terms of trust and combining capabilities across various types of platforms. So I'm going to kick off with a basic question, which is how does combining CPaaS and customer experience shift the value proposition for both solution providers and your end enterprise customers, whether it be in ROI, customer satisfaction, or operational efficiency? So Caitlin, I'll let you lead off with that.
The doozy to start with. No, it's a great setup. So one of the things that we had actually talked about prior, right, was what even is CCaaS versus CPaaS. I think that as you start to look at some of the analyst definitions of the market, you've seen over time that the capabilities between the two different product suites are starting to sort of converge. You'll have, contact center platforms that have sort of CPaaS-y-like capabilities and CPaaS-y-like companies that sort of start to verge into more CX. So I think it's important to understand when you're looking at improving customer experience, like an enterprise, what is helpful to navigate the different pieces and parts is understanding really where the competitive sort of positioning lives. So like Bandwidth, for example, right, we're CPaaS, also a DCA as well, and we really sit sort of lower in the stack. So we focus on enabling other companies to leverage our APIs to then create a little bit richer experiences higher level in the stack. That's kind of where we focus. We focus our customer experience really on the actual utilization and the developer experience of the APIs that then they're able to kind of customize for the end enterprises that they go out and serve. So I think long-winded way to say it's important to understand what you're looking for with each. So if you have a contact center platform that you love and know, and then you're looking for maybe a richer messaging experience that you could potentially leverage with your CPaaS capabilities, it just kind of depends on what your individual enterprise or entity that you're sort of leveraging or integrating into. Yeah.
Frank, your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, when we met, there was a situation where we had one provider at the CCaaS solution, right? We had one provider, and it got us stuck. What I realized in talking to Paul was a lot of the platforms, all the CCaaS solutions, they're not agnostic in the solutions that they bring in, the partners that they bring in. And about 3 years ago, there started to be a shift to that. 2 years ago, really started to be a shift to that. This last year, there's been a huge shift to where partnerships are more prevalent, right? CCaaSs are building to be more friendly with different partners, different solutions. And that's really required because the customer, to meet them where they are, you have to be able to orchestrate the experience of their customer. You have to be able to tell the story for their customer and bring it all together at whatever time, whatever channel that they want to be. There's a couple studies out there. One said 91%. This is an AI, but I'm going to drop it anyway. They said 91% of businesses are pushing AI onto their consumers as a self-service. Well, when they interviewed the same customer base, only 50% even wanted it. So it's taking the customer and listening to their customer, and then the other players, like the CPaaS or the CCaaS, listening to the buyers of their product and saying, how can we orchestrate better for that very end user and how they're going to build the trust and not play against each other. And that's where, y'all do it really, really well, where y'all play really well in the sandbox with other partners. So that's kind of where this group came together. When you look at bandwidth, they're like that zero at the end, because if you use them, they're going to amplify your product even more and more and more. So it's taking the different strengths of each product and taking an agnostic solution and building it for that end user experience.
Ramy, the word AI was uttered. I think that's only the 5th time today.
To do that.
It's your cue.
I believe there's an opportunity, a window of opportunity there for you.
No, I think before we go into the AI topic, I think from our perspective with Cisco, I come from the IMI Mobile, where we were an aggregator, we're a direct carrier partner in several markets. But then I think quickly at Cisco we realized it's all about CX. It's not about CPaaS versus CCaaS. And therefore we actually merged everything together under CX. So that little small business that Cisco has with contact center and that small business of CPaaS, we now made it a bigger mess into one business unit, where at the end of the day, either an enterprise or a consumer, they want the same thing. I want to be able to talk to my customers on any channel that they want, voice included, right? And not just automate that conversation, but also escalate that conversation to a real person when it's needed, right? Rather than trying to figure out, okay, I'm stuck, sorry, I don't understand you, please say it again, right? And then I hop you over to a call center, and then the first thing the agent says is, how can I help you today? Right? That's really frustrating from a consumer experience perspective. So that's why we thought that it all starts and ends with the customer experience. And therefore we merged all our products together where you can get a unified experience across, starting from messaging or voice through automation and then through a live agent. And I think it's your point, Paul, they're all convergent.
Yeah, and unfortunately that we don't have Zoom here, but the reality is we can probably analyze Zoom in a different context, which is all of this is about competition and evolution in terms of all of our go-to-market activities. Zoom is an interesting entity, like a different form of mammal that I'm wondering is going to be the alpha predator, because it has so many different functionality and capabilities which are replicated in terms of the representation on the panel, but how they might go to market differently or similarly, because at the end of the day, they have that wedge that's a little different and emerging from something that nobody was expecting. We all understand their emergence, their flash emergence, if you will, during the COVID era, and what they're doing with that as a result. Any perspectives?
I'm a little bullish on Zoom. I've been working with them for the last several months, and kind of getting an idea of what they are, what they're like. And the biggest thing came to mind was, a healthy company internally tends to be a healthy company externally. If their people are happy, their customers are happy. Zoom's product was created for them to sell to their customers. So they want to create happy customers on their customers' end, and then happy employees, and then in turn those employees would create more happy customers. That's literally their motto. I didn't necessarily believe that until I went to their sales kickoff a few weeks ago, and I was just blown away. I mean, the engagement that they have internally is truly, truly healthy. And then you look at the solution. They're bringing everything under one world, one globe. They have the binoculars. If you look at their website, it's very, very cool. And that's truly the only one that I've seen. I've been doing it for a long time on the customer side. It's truly the only solution I see, other than Cisco, who does a very good job as well, who have really brought all the products together under one house with a very smooth orchestration that's simple to use. It has proper flows, proper connections, and is a strong partner with other solutions that they may not have the skill set to build. There's only two players that I've seen in my experience doing this, and that would be, the Cisco product and then the Zoom product, being able to bolt on, but actually bring them in as partners to amplify their product completely. So that's what I think.
Yeah, and maybe what I'd add to that is, and we talked a little bit about this with Jessica as well, Zoom sits in an interesting position in the market because they were more digital native, cloud native, so they don't necessarily have the on-prem legacy enterprise base.
Right.
So their customers have a fundamentally different needs and different things that they value. And this is where, when you start to look at how we play together, it's the co-opetition, the frenemy mindset, right?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
we kind of need to leverage each other's strengths to be able to provide the CX necessary for the enterprises, not just Fortune 500, but also small and medium-sized businesses that may need a little bit more flexibility or M&As. So I think that's really interesting, and I want to double-click on sort of what you said and come back to the integration piece, because I think that really is, if you walk away with nothing else, it's the integration and the plays between sort of the contact center systems as well as the CPaaS systems, and how those are going to integrate and sort of play together over time.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree. I
Well,
think
good.
they're like, we see Zoom out there, but I think Cisco has the legacy of the on-prem, their massive on-site deployments for contact center, and now we're offering also the cloud component of it for customers that want to migrate. But a lot of our customers still want to stay on-prem, just because of the sheer size of their contact center deployments. So there is a path to cloud. I think CPaaS is all cloud from our perspective. So these two worlds basically are merging together, like they're intersecting, to provide, again, it comes down to CX.
Yeah, that's consistent with the conversation that we had in preparation for the panel, where I was starting to talk about combinatorial thinking, which is essentially integrating or having a strategy and a thought process that's not a direct shot, it's a carom shot. And you start having a recognition of the value of integrating. So in that context, are any of your clients or partners leveraging CPaaS and CCaaS integration, where you bring in one of your potential competitors, but in this case, it's someone who's offering a capability that you don't have yourself?
So it's a little bit different for us.
Or internally, if I
Yeah,
may, in your
internally
case.
maybe. So
Right.
because I think that's really where when we look at the contact center, we have it extensible. So you can bring other components that are not Cisco into your contact center, like workforce management, workforce optimization. All these are bolt-ons that you bring into your contact center. But then we augment with our own products, right? Whether you want sign-on with like Duo, something like for security, right? You want CPaaS capabilities, you want messaging, you want voice. Those are all, think of different companies within Cisco, but we're all one Cisco at the end of the day. So it's just bringing these different components to the customer.
Yeah, and if you were present for Aunt Bartolo's speech earlier, right, it was interesting because what he was presenting was sort of almost like a middleware layer sort of at the carrier level. So it's more divorced from the actual enterprise, right, than we're talking about here, but same kind of thought process that I think actually Cisco as well as Bandwidth kind of offers, where we sit in a position where we're actually the calling plan provider for many of the large UCaaS and CCaaS players in the market. And so one of the things that we've been doing as we've been going out to the enterprise is saying, hey, like, we understand going out and sort of building into the calling plans is not necessarily always the best user experience for your users. Maybe you want to just utilize sort of our integrations. That way you can figure out and pick best of breed what you actually want to integrate into, and we will handle sort of like the actual just network API layer for the enterprise itself. And so that's really where we focused our integration back to the whole what piece and at what level of the stack do you play in? That's kind of where we've chosen to kind of focus on what the customer experience is. And our customer in that instance is the actual enterprise sort of IT itself.
Right.
And how their internal experience looks like when they're actually integrating into some of these UCaaS and CCaaS platforms.
And so procedurally, you and I'm looking at you, the sales guys, quote unquote. Procedurally, you're bringing in a multifaceted team, multi-capable team, to be able to execute this type of engagement, whether it's the qualifying or the presentation, the adoption, and then the execution. And so is that changing, or is that creating more tension, more pressure internally to be able to be more integrated in your approach?
I think it's changing. I don't think it's getting more difficult. I think we've learned from some headaches in the market, right? So I just did I did a deal with Zoom not long ago, and we had 18 people on site with a customer. 18 people, all subject matter experts in their own right, because this company had 18 different solutions that they required for that scope of business. It was a BPO, a very large BPO. So that's what we're up against, right? The end user of most of our products, they have 15 on average solutions that they have to explore. That's 15 different procurement teams they have to work with. That's 15 different pricing negotiation battles they have to fight. And their margins, by the way, they're talking 15% margins, where SaaS companies we like 60-70% margins if we don't like higher. But eventually we're going to cannibalize our customer if we don't find the right mix to bring all the players together, to bring their ability to gain increase market share or increase their margin ability just by performance. So we have to bring all of it together. And so I think that we're learning from mistakes, and we're bringing more people who are subject matter experts for each type of tool or solution that they need, so that we can coach them. And that might be use our own. Now the bad thing would be is, when companies want to bring their own, they kind of hodgepodge a solution together. If you have a band and the drums are playing one thing and the horns are playing another, and we talked about this, and the strings are playing another, it sounds horrible. Unless you can have all players playing the same tune at the same time, you don't have a good product. And that's what happens when you hodgepodge solutions together. But when you integrate, like we were talking with Caitlin, you get a very nice orchestration of products, and you get a very nice symphony and a solution for your client.
So all three of you represent international global enterprises in the space. And you've just outlined a hypothetical to reality in terms of process and the approach, and what resources need to be applied to, let's say, the buyer problem. Do you think, because this is a group focused on North America, do you think that effort to integrate is easier in North America, more difficult? Is it easier in other places around the world that you have experience in? What can you bring relative to this particular geography?
I don't think this geography from an enterprise perspective is any different than any large enterprise. I think with Cisco, we have a huge partner network that we work with. If you've ever done business with Cisco, you're either going through a partner, or if you're one of, let's say, the Global 1000, you're going direct with Cisco. We have teams that help with implementation, integration, and all that. Same with the partner network; they do the same thing. So I don't think the effort in North America is different than anywhere else in the world. And we see a lot of, even North American companies, they're distributed all over the world. So it's no longer just one spot. Actually, the trouble is connecting the whole thing together, regardless of where they're based.
Yeah, I would mostly agree. I would say the only thing I would add is maybe the options for North American software companies. They're just the proliferation of choices over the last few years has really increased, and so maybe just simply from a best of breed perspective, you have more optionality, and therefore, as a CPaaS provider or a CCaaS provider, sometimes picking and choosing who to integrate, because we only have so many developers and so much white space on our roadmap. So where do you integrate into? And I think that's maybe there's just more options that makes it more difficult for the people managing the roadmap. That would be my take.
Makes it more difficult for the decision making.
Well, I think the pressure from the end user side is higher too, right? it's a low trust market, because if all of the CCaaS players have thrown out FUD, fear of unknown disaster and these other things, they're throwing them out there, saying this, I do it better than this one, or no, they don't do this, or go ask them these questions, trying to paint a bad picture. It just brings that trust level down. And so you're going to have more pressure, and you're going to have a slower process, a slower buying process, and then a slower implementation process. And they're more likely to bring in an outside solution or outside partner because they've vetted them out. So I think we got to reestablish that trust first, and that's going to bring that pressure down, and it's going to allow us to function better with that end user of the product.
So Ramy, we're at 6 mentions of AI for the day so far, so we're still in single digits. And this is a generic question, but I want to avoid AI being discussed in a very generic way, which is what emerging technologies or trends, obviously AI, but also specific to the customer care side, which includes chatbots, video, sentiment analysis, are most likely to accelerate the CPaaS CX convergence over the next year, specifically in North America.
Yeah, so I promise you guys I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But if you've been watching Cisco...
We queued it up for you, man. So
yeah, we've made a couple announcements over the last couple of months.
You made an announcement?
Yeah.
What was that?
So I think yesterday we went GA with our AI agent solution, which basically automates the entire conversation, regardless of the channel. So voice, messaging, digital, website, doesn't matter what it is. But it kind of automates that entire conversation. But it also continues into the CCaaS world. So it automates it on the CPaaS side. But then once you go into the agent world, it's now called AI Assistant, where it's actually assisting the human agent, whether it's summarizing the conversation so you don't have to repeat yourself, doing the suggested responses, analyzing the sentiments and all that. So it's, for us, that was like kind of the missing element that linked CPaaS to CCaaS, because help the consumer address, agents became more efficient, and at the same time, the conversation is more natural, where it's more like a human-like conversation. You're not talking to a robot, basically. And I think that's really where we're seeing the next big jump, is a lot of enterprises are like, okay, you're going to help me with the conversation side on the consumer, but you're also helping like one of the features that I really like was, and it's really silly, but I loved it, is agent burnout. One of the things is that if an agent has a really tough conversation with a customer, right, why not let the AI flash up like a pop-up, say, take a 5-minute break. Yeah. That's it. Just soothing music, stop all incoming calls, divert them to someone else in the queue, and just give an agent a 5-minute break.
Yeah, and even my own experience in the CCaaS space, the retention factor is a real number that they have great concerns about, which speaks directly to your concerns about burnout, agent burnout.
So those are things that help, I would say, the consumer, because they're having a delightful experience, but it also helps the agent having a better experience of service.
Let's get some crowd participation. How many of y'all have had a call from a call center, or you've called into a call center, right? Okay, so everybody's gonna raise your hands. Come on, I know. That's what I knew y'all were gonna do that. So how many of y'all actually have sat down in a call center side by side with an agent before? Good crowd, right? So a lot different. So if you've sat down with an agent, I ran call centers for about 20 years, and you sit down with them. What he just said is absolutely right. I mean, some calls last 5 minutes, and they're easy calls. Some calls last 20 minutes, and that agent's in tears. Yeah, it's real, but AI isn't a tool to replace, it's a tool to support. So if you can encourage that agent, you can support that agent, you can find out where that agent is, enable them to do a better job, that's where AI is the strength of a contact center. And again, you blend it with the other tools that you've enabled them with, you empower them to use those tools. That's going to create the healthy contact center, but that's also going to feed up, because you're going to get better tools, you're going to get better support from your other players as well. So I think that's the right move that Cisco made. And Zoom has it. Jessica's not here, so I gotta say it. Zoom has it. They have AI Companion, and it does a phenomenal job. If you don't have it, you should use it. So that's my only drop there for Jessica. So,
Caitlin, anything you want to contribute?
No, I think we keep coming back to the integrations and the interoperability between the two, right? So when you're thinking about CX, we actually, in Barcelona, my colleague and I talked a little bit about the the future sort of conversational commerce and how really AI and then sort of just the externality of customer expectations are really pushing us forward towards a more conversational world. And so both sort of CPaaS, communications platforms, and also contact center, very heavily conversation oriented. And so as you start to get more rich capabilities where we have natural language processing and the ability to kind of pull some of that strain off the agent, maybe you're already setting a better customer experience with messaging by inviting the customer to join the line when an agent is ready. So you already have prepped an individual to be less sort of hot and bothered. You know, if I'm calling in because my flight was delayed for hours and hours yesterday, right? And then I'm offered the opportunity to speak. It's little things like that, the orchestration between just the experience of the messaging of the contact center as well as the communications platform that just creates an overall customer experience that's better and figuring out how to put those two together.
And tell me about your exposure to sentiment analysis. I mean, psychologically, if you start thinking about this, this is essentially artificial intelligence being applied to how you're thinking, how you're feeling during an engagement with a customer care analyst and call center. So how is that creeping into the ecosystem that you all work with?
It's coaching the agent. If you think of it, if I know that the tone of the customer that I'm speaking with is a happy customer, then start with a happy note, right? If that customer is really pissed off, then let's figure out how to help that customer, right? Because we don't want to waste their time by repeating. And so I think it's just a tool to help agents communicate better with customers, right? From sentiment analysis. It's not replacing that human touch. That's why it's assisting the human. It's not replacing it. Now, from an AI agent perspective, you also don't want the AI component to piss off your customer. Sorry for lack of better terms, right? Because at the end of the day, if I kept saying, hey, I don't understand you, please repeat, at what point in time do you just pull the plug and move them to a real person? And I think those are the guardrails that you have to play with to say, okay, if I asked you once and I didn't understand it the second time, I'm not going to ask you again. Hey, sorry, Paul, we're going to move you to a live agent. Maybe they can help you a bit better. That's where the fine-tuning comes to balance the right sentiment from a consumer perspective.
Balance is the key word there.
Some more crowd participation. How many of you, you're upset, you had a really bad experience, your flight got canceled, you want to chat with a bot? How many of you want to talk to a human? Human? Yeah, okay. Yeah, 17% of consumers, when they're upset, want to talk to a machine. The rest of us want to talk to humans, right? We want to talk to a person. So again, it's taking that sentiment, using, and most sentiments are really their word selection, right? So it's what words are they choosing, and you're trying to define what that path is that they want based on words they're saying or you're interpreting them to say. Some places do it better.
I think we all have traumatic experiences talking to IVRs, and press one, right? But if the actual AI, if you think of it, if that automation is actually changing your flight, giving you the options you want, if it's good, you mind speaking to without having to speak to a human? Like I'd like to say that story. I have two kids, right, 2 babies. It's impossible to speak to a human with them jumping around. If anybody has kids, it's practically impossible. So if there is a way to have a conversation with an automation tool that will resolve my problem quickly, efficiently, and without having to be on the phone for an hour, I'd take that route in a heartbeat.
Excellent. Well, we've got 52 seconds left. So we've got time for one question.
Hi, James Morgan, Twilio. Curious, one of the dynamics around AI is how much time you give the AI to reason in terms of the question that you ask it, right? You have these, OpenAI says that they're going to sell $20,000 a month, like PhD quality AI models for use, right? And I think I'd be curious if there's any kind of information or experience that you guys would be willing to share about how smart the AI is that you're deploying, and then how does that core, or maybe how much resourcing that AI is getting in its application of an answer and thinking about the answer, or maybe even doing the answer. I think, Ramy, to your point about if the AI can solve the problem for me and answer my call right now, I'll be one of the 17% to take to chat with the bot first if it can do it, right? That's the skepticism I think that we're all trying to overcome. And I think part of that is like how much resourcing is going into AI to get that. I'd be curious, like as you guys have seen a lot of these deployments, what has been the amount of resourcing that's necessary to really sort of unlock AI in the CCaaS or UX environment?
So there's a lot of research on it, especially on voice. I think there's a 2-second threshold where you ask the question to the AI, from a human brain perspective, you're expecting an answer within 2 seconds. And 2 seconds, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I think it's 2 seconds the marker is. And if the AI is responding at that 2-second marker, you still have a human-like conversation. I'm not saying human, but it's a human-like conversation. So you can get all your processing done, all your knowledge bases digested, and the AI to respond, and especially if there's an action involved. So say calling a third-party API to change your ticket. In this case, it's a 2-second marker. Now, there are ways to improve that, like what we call streaming, for example. So as the AI is formulating the answer, it's reading the response as it's being generated. So those are some of the techniques to lower that. Some of it are placeholders, like fillers. Hold on, give me a sec. You know what I mean? So you just bought yourself another 2 seconds to kind of complete that action and come back to the user. Some of the use cases we've built is actually, okay, let me confirm your appointment, and I'll send you a message with the confirmation. So therefore, I took the AI voice component off the hook, and then I'm sending you the confirmation via message that your appointment has been reserved and rebooked. So there are a lot of ways that you can play around, but in a voice conversation, again, it's kind of that 2-second marker. And for messaging, you have a little bit more tolerance because it's more of an async conversation. You're going back and forth.
What he said.
Ditto.
All right, well, one more? End of time. All right. Well, thank you very much to the panelists for bringing attention to this concept to conversion process.